In the chapter, I tried to trace the initial overreaction, American overreaction to 9/11, and then the process by which this overreaction was corrected. I think that the U.S. was obviously shocked by the scale of the attack, the audacity of the attack. And not surprisingly, it responded very vigorously and in some cases simply overshot in the nature of its response and underestimated the scale of commitments that it would be undertaking. The most obvious overreaction was to invade Iraq only a little more than a year after we'd invaded and occupied Afghanistan, and suddenly we found ourselves occupying two very large countries with populations in the midst of serious ethnic and other sectarian conflicts. The response in Afghanistan was obviously necessary and appropriate to the scale of the attack. In retrospect, I think most people agree that the invasion of Iraq, while it may have some beneficial effects in the long run, was probably unnecessary and an overreaction at the time. So I think that the main lesson of Iraq, and it's a lesson we should have learned long before Iraq, because Iraq was actually the seventh country in little more than 10 years that we'd helped to liberate and then tried to rebuild, is how difficult, time-consuming, and expensive that process is. Doesn't mean don't do it. It just means be very discriminating about how often and where you do it. But over that 7 years, we'd first gone in and liberated Kuwait in early 90s, and then we went into Somalia, and then into Haiti, and then into Bosnia, and then into Kosovo, and then into Afghanistan, and finally into Iraq. Of those 7 countries, 6 are Muslim. So when the American Army went into Iraq in 2003, there was no army in the world with more experience in nation building. And there was no Western army in the world with more experience operating in a Muslim society. So you would have to ask yourself how we could do this so often and yet do it so badly. And the answer is we weren't taking it seriously, that we were doing each of these as if it was the first one we'd ever done, with sending new people with new ideas to face what should have been familiar challenges. And we were treating each of them as if it was the last one we were ever going to do. And we were then, at the end of the mission, dissipating all of the expertise and all of the experts, rather than creating a doctrine that we could apply and modify over time as the result of experience, and building a cadre of experts who could go from one mission to the next. We weren't doing any of those things. Now, I think today we've learned a lot of those lessons, are beginning to apply them in Afghanistan based on the experiences of Iraq. And both the U.S. military and the U.S. State Department and USAID are all trying to create a doctrine for counterinsurgency and for post-conflict reconstruction, and are building a cadre of expertise in this area. But it's something we should have started doing a lot earlier.